Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hey there. This episode is coming out on Monday, the 7th of April, 2025. So depending on when you're hearing it, it may not be completely in the moment as regards what's going on in the world. Having said that, the lesson embedded in this particular episode, I think, is going to be universal and timeless. So Donald Trump is very much back in the headlines. Not that he's ever out of the headlines since he became president, to be fair. He's got a skill in that context. But so is panic. I mean, Mr. Trump announced his global strategy for tariffs, which has triggered all sorts of panic around potential trade wars and global unrest and who's going to do what, stock markets dropping significantly. But that's not what I want to talk about today, because what I've observed as well, it's been building over the last period of time. It's accelerated, I think, since Donald Trump has come into his office because of the rhetoric coming out in terms of the change in strategy, political strategy for the US, certainly for the coming years. The area that interests me is obviously a mental one. And what I'm noticing is an increase in mental chaos. So this episode isn't about politics. It's about the reaction mentally that you might be having to what's going on in the world, and why I think that reaction is where the real danger lies, not in the danger of changes in tariffs. Because the thing that most people call adversity is often just an unprocessed, unchecked emotion, an emotional reaction that can very often lead to a negative emotional spiral. And if it's left unchecked, it'll rob you of your clarity, your creativity, and ultimately your agency, your power. And here's, I suppose, the point perhaps for today's episode is, what if adversity or perceived adversity isn't the problem, that it isn't in your way, but it's actually trying to show you a new way? So from my point of view, the true problem in today's world right now, and I'm talking about this week, and there's all sorts of reaction and panic and a lot of what ifs when it comes to Mr. Trump, but the true problem isn't him or tariffs or even change. For me, it's your inner state in response to it. Now, when leaders, founders, or anyone really react to adversity with mental rigidity, I think they miss what the moment is offering. And the real edge in performance is where you kind of learn how to loosen your grip mentally. Now, I started recently to play around on a platform called Substack, where it's kind of a writer's platform. So if you're interested, I'll put a link in the show notes, but if you go into Substack, you can just search under Shane Craddock. And I've written an article there just this week about loosening your grip mentally. So, if you're a golfer and you're holding onto a club too tight, you can very often cause a problem yourself with tension. But mentally holding onto things, gripping things too tight, also creates tension. So if you want to increase your performance, consider loosening your inner grip, the mental grip. And which means kind of not getting as reactive or as attached or caught up with things. And if you can let the dust settle inside you before you act, you kind of will bring in a different element to you that actually allows for a high level of clarity and performance. Now, global headlines definitely do seem to trigger fear more than not. And people then spin off into catastrophic thinking or worst case scenario thinking. Or, a CEO, for example, in a business context, just to kind of take it out of politics, a CEO could see falling numbers in his business and maybe starts reacting to that and starts making desperate changes, but without real strategic clarity. Or let's bring it into something very personal as a parent. Like, you might, as a parent, see your child struggle. And then immediately, instead of actually just pausing to watch what's emerging, we immediately flip into fix mode. But we miss what's actually really needed and very often create more problems. So adversity, they're just three simple examples, but adversity shows up all the time in many different ways. I suppose the outer side of adversity is always going to be different, but to me, the inner choice is always the same. It's either I can react and tighten my grip, or I can learn to loosen my grip, accepting what's going on. But really, I'm doing that to make sure that my state stays in the right zone so that I'm primed to see where the opportunity is as it emerges. And it's a question to consider as to which mode you're in. Are you in a mode where you're tightening the grip, or are you able to loosen the grip, even in the midst of significant change? Now, in the article that I referred to on Substack, I mentioned a story about a very successful client, CEO, who was blindsided by a major change in their industry when it came to regulations. And the change was very significant. They actually lobbied hugely to try and stop the change, but they failed. And ultimately, the regulation change came in. It actually cost his business millions because they were forced to make major changes. So he initially went into kind of a frozen, I suppose, panic mode in a way, very begrudgingly angry, upset, but ultimately learned how then to stop that spiral. Worked on his inner game, accepted reality, stayed grounded, stayed present, and then gradually started to see a new opportunity because of this regulating change. And he saw something that actually very few other people did because he was looking for it. And ultimately, that new idea started as an experiment, which became a new division, a new business division. And that division over the following 4 to 5 years became the most profitable part of his company. But it gets better. A few years later, he positioned the company for a sale. He succeeded in that exit and for a life-changing sum. And afterwards, when we were kind of like digesting, reflecting everything, I remember him saying to me like that, a version of, if that regulation hadn't happened, I never would have created the division that changed everything. In a way, that adversity, which I thought was the most terrible thing that had ever happened to me in business, became the single best thing that had ever happened to me in business. I wouldn't have got the value of my company if that hadn't happened. So in that context, it wasn't a setback. At the time, he thought it was. It was a signal to something better. Right? That doesn't mean it's always going to work out like that, but I think it's worth noting. So in a way, you could say adversity is a bit like a weather system. It can come through, a storm can come through, which can cause damage. It can cause setbacks. It can cause pain. But ultimately, it's really not always the end of the world at all. And if you chase every storm cloud with a fire hose, you're going to exhaust yourself. It's better to let the storm pass, let the clouds clear, ride it out. And as somebody said to me before, most people react to the forecast. The best people that wait for the sky to clear and to open. I think that's the best leaders too. Don't be reacting to the headlines. Don't be reacting to the forecasts. Stay grounded, look for the opportunity, look for what's real, not what the rhetoric is. So some questions for you. What headlines, conversations, or situations are you mentally gripping onto this week, last week? Where are you? What are you mentally gripping onto? What if you pause for perspective instead of panic? Pausing for perspective. And when you pause in that perspective, what hidden value might this problem or this thing you don't like or this adversity, what value might it actually be pointing you toward? Where might be the opportunity? It's one of my favorite questions. It's a question that I know, working with some really great entrepreneurs over the years, that's a question that's kind of almost embedded in their DNA. They're always looking for the opportunity. So maybe this week, when adversity or some form of resistance shows up this week, as in something you just don't like, something that you're not particularly keen on, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's Trump, whether it's tariffs, whether it's something close to home and changing your business, a team member doing something you don't like, somebody leaving the business. That's a very common one, actually, that somebody might leave the business you don't want to leave, but actually you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to replace them? Ultimately, everybody's replaceable. That's what you learn as a business owner, as a CEO. And sometimes it's the best thing that could ever happen. So when the adversity or resistance shows up this week, maybe pause, maybe remember this podcast, breathe, count to 10, and then just ask yourself, okay, what if this is actually for me? What if this isn't a block or the universe picking on me? What if this is an opportunity to create a pivot, a better pivot in a new direction? It's a real skill, this. Not easy to do, but I've seen time and time again in my own life, seen it with really great people, great entrepreneurs in particular. This is something that they can be very, very good at, that when everybody else is panicking, they're just pausing for perspective, waiting for the clouds to clear, for the sky to clear, and then they move. So it's about not reacting. It's about letting the clarity emerge from within. And ultimately, if you think about it, the best answers come when you stop demanding one. In that kind of a way, I think adversity is not something to resist. It's in many ways the very force that can catalyze transformation if we don't waste our energy fighting it. I've seen it time and time again in my own life, and with clients, is that very often adversity forces us to change. When very often with a lot of people, when change happens, they kind of resist it even unconsciously. They don't want to do it. And adversity maybe is nature's way or life's way of forcing us into positive action. I saw that a lot actually during the pandemic. So adversity doesn't block your path. I guess that's the point from today. Sometimes it is the path to a new way. And in a week of incredible political noise, media panic, and economic tension globally, I'm hoping that maybe this might be the calmest and most powerful thing that you can remember for the months ahead. That's it for this week. Ciao for now.